government involvement in higher education takes place at two levels: the federal level and the state level. So let's start with the federal level. Now, although there are no mandates per se for higher education from the federal government, you do have some involvement in the form of research dollars and grant money. And then you also have involvement in the form of student financial aid. So when I talk about research dollars and grant dollars, what I mean is that at an institution, let's say a professor has an idea for some really amazing project. That professor can find grants that are available from the federal government, apply for those grant funds, receive that money, and then be able to pursue that project as a result of those funds. Those research dollars are coming from the government and being pumped into higher education institutions through the different grant proposals and research proposals. Now, the other piece, student financial aid, of course, is where the federal government provides the money to the students, and then the students use that money at the institutions of their choice. So at the state level, you have state appropriations for higher education institutions. So that means that a percentage of state funds can go toward public higher education institutions, and that will help fund some of the costs for the services that higher education institutions provide. Recently, however, there has been a decrease in state appropriations, and what some institutions have done in response to that is increase their tuition and fees. Now, state involvement in higher education can also take on a different form that's not directly related to appropriations. An example of this shows up in the November 2013 edition of the Chronicle of Higher Education. In North Carolina, a bill was passed recently to do away with the 10% increase that teachers receive when they get a master's degree. So you'd have maybe a sixth grade teacher decide to go back to get his or her master's degree, and then upon receiving that degree would receive a 10% increase in pay. When the state of North Carolina did away with that 10% increase, colleges of education in particular were concerned because students may not decide to take out the time, energy, and money to pursue their master's degrees in education if they weren't going to see that 10% increase in their checks. Because at least, particularly if you don't have the funds to go to school and you're relying on maybe loans or other forms of financial aid, if you aren't going to see a return on that investment, it may delay your entrance into a graduate program or even cause you to wonder if you're going to enter a graduate program altogether. Now, not all institutions experienced an issue with this. In fact, Ball State reported that they were not adversely affected by the state doing away with the 10% increase in pay, but some other institutions were very concerned about that. So although that doesn't directly relate to state appropriations, it is an example of how state involvement in higher education can have a tremendous impact on what happens with programs and the way institutions choose to operate.